The cold rain of a Chicago autumn didn't just fall. It seeped into your bones. It was the kind of rain that promised to wash away the dirt from the city streets, but only ever seemed to make things grayer, heavier. It clung to my thin coat, dripped from the ends of my hair, and traced cold paws down my cheeks, mixing with the tears I refused to let my daughter see. We were standing under the flickering neon sign of a place called the Starlight Motel. The name was a cruel joke. The only star was a buzzing, half-lit bulb that cast a sickly yellow glow on the greasy puddle at our feet. Beside me, my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, shivered, her small hand clutching mine so tightly I could feel the faint tremor in her bones. She had on her favorite pink coat, the one with the little cat ears on the hood, now soaked and drooping. "Mommy, why are we here?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming of the rain on the pavement. "Why isn't Daddy coming?" I pulled her closer, wrapping my arm around her tiny shoulders, trying to shield her from a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. I had no answer, not one I could give her. The truth was a monster, too big and ugly to be spoken aloud in the dark. How could I tell her that her father, the man who tucked her in every night and called her his little princess, had cast us out? How could I explain that our beautiful home, with her sun-filled bedroom and the swing set in the backyard, was no longer ours? I couldn't. So I just held her and whispered back, "Daddy's busy. Sweetheart, we're just going on a little adventure. You and me." The light tasted like ash in my mouth. My perfect life, my perfect husband, my perfect family, it was all a lie. And I had been the last one to know. But that night was the end. To understand the end, you have to see the beginning. 6 months earlier, my world wasn't gray and cold. It was drenched in sunlight. 6 months earlier, I was Eleanor Vance, and I had everything a woman could ever want. The sun poured into our kitchen in Maple Creek, a suburb so idyllic it could have been a movie set. The light gleamed off the polished marble countertops and the spotless stainless steel appliances. Outside, the automatic sprinklers danced across our perfectly manicured lawn, the scent of freshly cut grass mixing with the sweet perfume of the peonies I'd just arranged in a crystal vase. My world was painted in pastel colors, soft and gentle and safe. Life was a predictable, comforting rhythm. Yoga on Tuesdays, book club on Wednesdays, volunteering at Lily's school on Fridays. My days were filled with the quiet, important tasks of maintaining a home and raising a child. It was the life I had chosen. Or rather, it was the life Mark and I had chosen together. That morning, I was humming along to some soft indie music on the radio, my hands deep in a bowl of flour and sugar. We were preparing for a party. Not just any party, but our 10th wedding anniversary celebration. It felt like a monumental achievement, a decade of love and partnership that deserved to be celebrated in style. Our house, a sprawling colonial with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for a small army, was the perfect venue. The front door opened and closed, followed by the familiar sound of Mark's briefcase hitting the hardwood floor in the hall. "Elle, I'm home," his voice called out, rich and confident. A moment later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway, and my heart did its familiar little flutter. Mark Vance was a handsome man. He had the kind of easy charm that put everyone at ease, with dark hair that was just starting to show a few distinguished threads of silver at the temples, and a smile that could sell snow in a blizzard. He was a successful financial advisor, the kind of man other men wanted to be, and other women wished their husbands were. He was my rock, my provider, my everything. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped his arms around me from behind, kissing the top of my head. He smelled of expensive cologne and the crisp, clean scent of the city. "Something smells good," he murmured into my hair. "Don't tell me. You're practicing for the big day?" I laughed, leaning back against his chest. "It's Lily's favorite chocolate cake. I figured we needed a dress rehearsal. Everything has to be perfect for Saturday. Everything is always perfect when you're in charge," he said, his voice sincere. He held up a small bouquet of daisies. "I saw these and thought of you." It was a small gesture, but it was so typically Mark. He never forgot the little things. He was a husband who brought home flowers for no reason, who left sweet notes on the bathroom mirror, who always told me how beautiful I was, even when I was covered in flour. "They're lovely," I said, my heart swelling. "Thank you." He let me go and loosened his tie, his expression shifting slightly. A faint line appeared between his brows. "Tough day. The market is all over the place. A couple of big portfolios are giving me a headache." "Oh, no. Is everything okay?" I asked, my brow furrowing with concern. His smile returned instantly, erasing the worry. Nothing for you to worry about. Elle, that's my job. Your job is to make our life beautiful. He gestured around the pristine kitchen. At the flowers. At me. And you are exceptional at it. That was our dynamic. He handled the messy, complicated world of finance and stress. And I created a peaceful, beautiful sanctuary for him and Lily to come home to. It was a deal we'd made 10 years ago. I had been a promising young graphic designer, just starting to make a name for myself. But Mark had a different vision for our future. We can build something real. Elle, he had told me, his eyes full of earnest conviction. A family. A home. My career can support us both. You won't have to struggle with deadlines and difficult clients. You can focus on what really matters. And I had believed him. I packed away my portfolio, my ambitions, my Wacom tablet, and I embraced my new role. I never regretted it. Or so I told myself. Sometimes, late at night, I would browse design blogs and feel a faint, ghostly pang of what might have been. But then I would look at Lily sleeping peacefully in her bed, or feel Mark's arm around me, and the feeling would vanish. I had made the right choice. Mommy, Daddy. Lily came bounding into the kitchen, a whirlwind of sun-kissed hair and joyful energy. She launched herself into Mark's arms, and he effortlessly swung her up, her giggles echoing through the room like tiny bells. There's my little princess, he exclaimed, peppering her face with kisses. Did you help Mommy bake a cake today? Yes. And I licked the spoon, she announced proudly. That's the most important job of all, Mark said with a mock-serious expression that made her giggle even more. Watching them together, my husband and my daughter, my heart felt so full it might burst. This was it. This was everything. The perfect picture of a happy family. I turned back to the cake batter, a contented smile on my face. Nothing could ever touch us. We were safe in our beautiful house, in our beautiful life. Later that afternoon, while Lily was napping, I went up to the attic to find the special photo albums. I wanted to create a small display for the party, a timeline of our 10 years together. The attic was warm and smelled of cedar and memories. I found the box I was looking for, labeled The Beginning. Inside were photos from our wedding, our honeymoon in Italy, the day we brought Lily home from the hospital. Underneath the albums was my old design portfolio. I pulled it out, the black leather cool to the touch. I hadn't opened it in years. I carefully untied the ribbon and flipped it open. The pages were filled with my old work logos, posters, branding concepts. They were good. I could see the passion, the spark of creativity in every line. A strange feeling washed over me, a mix of pride and a gentle, hollow ache. This felt like a different person, a girl with different dreams. I quickly closed the portfolio and pushed it back into the box. It was silly to feel sentimental about a past I had willingly left behind. My art now was the life I had built. The perfectly balanced floral arrangement in the hall, the meticulously planned menu for the party, the loving and stable environment I created for my daughter. That was my masterpiece. That evening, Mark and I sat on the porch swing as dusk settled over Maple Creek. The air was warm, and the sky was a beautiful canvas of orange and purple. We held hands, swinging gently, the chains creaking in a familiar rhythm. 10 years, Mark said softly, looking out at the neighborhood. It feels like a lifetime and like yesterday all at once. I know, I agreed, resting my head on his shoulder. Do you remember our first apartment? The one with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who always fought? He chuckled. How could I forget? We had nothing but a mattress on the floor and a mountain of student debt. But we were happy. We were, I affirmed. But I like this better. Me too, he said, squeezing my hand. I did it all for you. Elle. For you and Lily. To give you this. He gestured vaguely at our house, our street, our life. To make sure you'd never have to worry about anything. His words were a warm blanket, chasing away any lingering chill from my trip to the attic. He was right. He had given me a life without worry. A life of security and beauty. He worked so hard to protect us from the harsh realities of the world. All he asked in return was my trust. And I gave it to him. Completely. Unconditionally. That was my first and greatest mistake. The night of the party was pure magic. String lights crisscrossed the backyard, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Laughter mingled with the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Our friends and neighbors, The carefully curated cast of Our Perfect Life moved across the lawn, their faces happy and relaxed. Mark was the perfect host, circulating with a bottle of expensive wine, his arm draped casually around my waist whenever he passed, pulling me in for a quick, possessive kiss. "Having a good time?" he'd murmur, his smile never faltering. "The best," I would reply, and I meant it. In those moments, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. My best friend, Sarah Jenkins, found me by the dessert table. Sarah was the complete opposite of me in almost every way. Where I was soft, she was sharp. Where I was a dreamer, she was a pragmatist. She was a brilliant, no-nonsense lawyer in downtown Chicago, with a mind like a steel trap and a wardrobe of impeccably tailored suits. We had been inseparable since college, a strange but perfectly balanced pair. "Well, Mrs. Vance," she said, raising an eyebrow as she surveyed the scene. "You've certainly outdone yourself. This looks like a page out of a magazine." I laughed, adjusting a stray raspberry on the cheesecake. That was the goal. Effortless perfection. Nothing's ever effortless. I know you've been planning this for months," she said, her tone softening. She gave me a quick, fierce hug. "But it is beautiful. And you look beautiful. I'm happy for you. 10 years is a big deal." "Thanks, Sar. It means a lot that you're here." I knew how much she disliked these suburban gatherings. She called them peacock parades. "Wouldn't miss it," she said, grabbing a glass of champagne. "So, how's Captain America?" she asked, nodding towards Mark, who was now captivating a small group with some story, his hands gesturing animatedly. "He's good. Stressed with work. But good," I said. Sarah took a slow sip, her eyes appraising him over the rim of her glass. She had always been a little wary of Mark, not in an overt way, but I could sense a reserve in her that she didn't have with anyone else. She thought he was too perfect, too smooth. I always dismissed it as her lawyerly cynicism. "He's always stressed with work," she commented dryly. "It's the burden of being the master of the universe." Before I could reply, Mark's mother cornered Sarah to ask for some free legal advice about her neighbor's tree, and I slipped away to check on the caterers. As I passed Mark's study, the door slightly ajar, I heard his voice. It was low and urgent, completely different from the relaxed, charming tone he'd been using all evening. I paused, thinking he was on the phone with a client. It was strange for him to take a work call during his own party. "No. It has to be done by the end of the month," he was saying, his voice a tense whisper. "All of it. I want every asset transferred." My hand froze on the doorknob. "Assets? Transferred? I don't care what you have to do," he continued, his voice sharp now. "The paperwork needs to be airtight. She can't know. Not until it's done. Is that clear?" A cold knot formed in my stomach. She can't know. Who was she? Was he talking about a client's wife? It must be. That was the only logical explanation. I pushed the door open gently. "Mark. Honey. Is everything okay?" He spun around, his phone snapping shut in his hand. For a split second, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Pure, cold panic. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his familiar, warm smile. Sorry. Just a client emergency. You know how it is. Can't switch off," he said, running a hand through his hair. He walked over and kissed my forehead. "Let's not let it spoil our night. What can I help you with?" His recovery was so quick, so seamless, that I instantly felt foolish. Of course it was a client. Mark was the soul of discretion. He handled the finances of some of the wealthiest families in Illinois. Of course he had to be secretive. "It's nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just making sure you are still enjoying your own party." "I am now that you're here," he said, guiding me out of the study and closing the door firmly behind us. He put his arm around me, and we walked back into the sea of lights and laughter. But for the rest of the night, a tiny, cold splinter of unease was lodged in my heart. The whispered words echoed in my head. "She can't know." In the weeks that followed, the splinter grew. The perfect surface of our lives began to show hairline cracks, almost invisible to the naked eye. But I could feel them. Mark started coming home later, his face etched with a fatigue that seemed deeper than just work. He'd pour himself a whiskey and retreat to his study for hours. When I bring him a plate of food, he'd be staring at spreadsheets on his laptop, which he quickly minimized the moment I walked in. Just market projections, he'd say with a tired wave of his hand. Boring stuff. The secret phone calls became more frequent. He'd walk out onto the back porch, his voice too low for me to hear, his back turned to the house. Once, his phone rang while he was in the shower. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID was just a string of numbers. No name. Before I could think about it, he burst out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist, and snatched the phone. A flash of anger in his eyes. I've told you not to touch my work phone. He snapped. I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. I didn't, it was just buzzing. His face immediately softened into an expression of regret. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just under an immense amount of pressure right now. This deal is make or break. It's not you. It's never you. He pulled me into a damp hug, and I forgave him instantly. I told myself I needed to be more understanding. He was carrying the weight of our world on his shoulders. The least I could do was give him space and support. But the distance between us grew into a quiet, unnerving chasm. The easy intimacy we once shared felt strained. He'd come to bed late and turn away from me, claiming exhaustion. The flowers stopped. The little notes disappeared. He still said I love you, but the words felt like a habit, an echo of a feeling rather than the feeling itself. One Tuesday evening, he came home and announced he had to fly to San Francisco for a few days. It was completely out of the blue. An emergency meeting with a new tech client. He explained, already pulling a suitcase from the closet. It's a huge opportunity. I have to go. While he packed, I noticed his watch on the dresser, his expensive silver watch. The one I had given him for our 5th anniversary. He never went anywhere without it. But there it sat. And in his bag, I saw him pack a casual shirt and jeans I hadn't seen him wear in years. It was a small, insignificant detail, but it felt wrong. It felt like he wasn't packing for a business trip. I pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid. I was letting the stress get to me, turning me into a suspicious, nagging wife. I kissed him goodbye at the door, told him to be safe, and watched him drive away until his taillights disappeared. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in our big, empty bed and felt a loneliness so profound it ached. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was a Thursday night. Lily was asleep upstairs. I was reading in the living room, waiting for Mark to get home. It was almost midnight when he finally walked in. He looked broken. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped. He didn't even seem to see me as he walked past and sank onto the sofa, dropping his briefcase to the floor with a thud. Mark, I said, putting my book down. My heart started to beat faster. What is it? What's wrong? He stared at the floor for a long moment before looking up at me. His eyes were hollow, defeated. It's over. He whispered, his voice raspy with despair. Everything. It's all gone. I knelt in front of him, my mind racing. What's gone? What are you talking about? He buried his face in his hands, his body trembling. The company. The investments. There was a deal, a big one. I put everything on the line. I was so sure. But the market, it turned overnight. It all collapsed. I stared at him, unable to process his words. They sounded like a foreign language. Collapsed. Gone. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. What do you mean? Gone. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. We're ruined. Eleanor. The house. The savings. Lily's college fund, everything. We've lost everything. We're bankrupt. The word hung in the silent room. Monstrous and unbelievable. Bankrupt. It was a word for other people. For stories on the news. It wasn't for us. Not for Mark and Eleanor Vance of Maple Creek. My first thought wasn't of the house or the money. It was for him. Seeing him so completely shattered broke my heart. All his hard work, all the pressure he'd been under, it had all led to this. I wrapped my arms around him, pulling his head to my shoulder. It's okay, I whispered, stroking his hair, my own fear a cold stone in my gut. It's okay. It's just money. We still have each other. We have Lily. We'll get through this. I promise. We will get through this together. He clung to me, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And as I held my broken husband, I believed my own words. I believed that our love was strong enough to survive anything. I had no idea that his tears weren't for what we had lost. They were for what he had just done. The next morning, I woke up with a gasp, my heart pounding against my ribs. For a blissful, fleeting second, I thought it had all been a terrible dream. The sun was streaming through the bedroom window, just like any other day. The birds were chirping outside. But then I saw Mark, already dressed, standing by the window, his back to me. He wasn't looking at the beautiful morning. He was staring at it like a man on death row watching his last sunrise. The nightmare was real. I sat up, the sheets pulling around my waist. Mark. He turned, and the despair on his face from the night before had been replaced by a grim, terrifying resolve. He looked like a soldier heading into a battle he knew he would lose. Get dressed, Elle, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. And get Lily ready. We have to leave. Leave? Leave and go where? Panic began to claw its way up my throat. What are you talking about? The bank will move fast, he said, avoiding my eyes. He started pacing, his movements jerky and agitated. The lawyers, the creditors, they'll freeze everything. They'll put a lien on the house. They could be here today. Eleanor, we can't be here when they come. It's not safe. The word safe hit me like a physical blow. Our home, our sanctuary, was no longer safe. But our things, I stammered, looking around the room at the life we had built. The antique dresser we'd found together. The paintings on the wall. Lily's baby pictures on the nightstand. We can't just leave everything. It's not ours anymore. He snapped, his voice cracking. He immediately softened, rushing to my side and taking my hands. His were ice cold. Listen to me. This is all my fault. I messed up. Elle, I messed up so badly. But my only priority right now is protecting you and Lily. We have to disappear for a little while, just until I can figure things out. Please, you have to trust me. Trust him. It was the foundation of our entire marriage. It was all I knew how to do. I looked into his desperate eyes and saw the husband I loved. A man drowning in failure and trying to save his family. How could I say no? Okay, I whispered, my own voice trembling. Okay, what do we do? The next hour was a blur of frantic, surreal activity. Mark's instructions were clipped and precise. 1 suitcase for you and Lily. Just the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, her favorite teddy bear. Nothing else. Don't take any jewelry. Nothing of value they can trace. No laptops. No iPads. He moved through the house with a ruthless efficiency. A general commanding a retreat, while I numbly packed a bag. My hands shaking so badly I could barely fold a t-shirt. He was in his study, shredding documents. The sound of the machine's hungry whine filled the house, a soundtrack to the dismantling of our lives. Waking Lily was the hardest part. I tried to make it sound like a game. We're going on a surprise trip. Sweetie, we have to pack fast. She was confused, her eyes still heavy with sleep. A trip? Where are we going? Is Daddy coming? Daddy has to work, but we'll see him soon. I lied, the words catching in my throat. I grabbed her stuffed rabbit, Barnaby, from her bed and shoved him into the suitcase. Seeing her room, with her drawings taped to the wall and her dolls arranged neatly on their shelf, felt like a physical pain. We were leaving behind her entire world. Downstairs, Mark was waiting by the door. He pressed a thick envelope of cash into my hand. It's not much, he said, his voice low. A few thousand. It's all the cash I could get my hands on. Use it for a motel. For food. Don't use your credit cards. They'll be frozen by noon. A few $1,000s. It felt like a fortune and nothing at all. He knelt down to hug Lily, burying his face in her hair. Be a good girl for mommy. Okay, princess. Daddy loves you more than anything. Lily hugged him back tightly. I love you too, Daddy. Then he stood and faced me. He pulled me into a hard, desperate embrace. I am so sorry, Elle, he whispered into my ear. I will fix this. I promise. I have to go dark for a while. It's safer for everyone. I'll contact you when I can. Just lay low. Keep Lily safe. He kissed me. A quick, almost brutal kiss. And then he was gone. He walked out the front door, got into his car, and drove away without looking back. He didn't just leave the house. He left us. I stood there in the silent foyer, Lily's small hand in mine, a single suitcase at our feet. The house suddenly felt vast and empty, like a museum of a life I used to live. I took one last look around, at the curved staircase, the sunlit living room, the echo of a decade of laughter and love. Then I took a deep breath. opened the door, and walked away, closing it softly behind me. I drove for an hour, with no destination in mind, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lily was quiet in the back seat, clutching Barnaby. The familiar, tree-lined streets of Maple Creek gave way to the anonymous sprawl of the highway. Finally, I saw the flickering sign for the Starlight Motel. It was far enough away. It was cheap. It was perfect. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. The wallpaper was peeling in the corner, and the brown carpet was stained with a history I didn't want to imagine. A single window looked out onto the parking lot and a rumbling highway. I dropped her suitcase on the floor and sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress springs groaned in protest. "Mommy, this place is yucky," Lily said, her nose wrinkled in disgust. I forced a bright smile. "It's not so bad. It's an adventure. Remember? We can pretend we're secret agents on a mission." The light felt thinner, more fragile, in this grim little room. But Lily, in her sweet innocence, bought it. She spent the afternoon jumping on the bed, pretending the floor was lava, turning our dingy prison into a playground. I watched her, a hollow ache in my chest. I tried to be present, to play along, but my mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The first few days were a strange limbo. We established a routine of sorts. We'd eat breakfast from the vending machine down the hall. We'd walk to a nearby park and spend hours on the swings. I'd read to her from the one storybook I'd managed to pack. At night, we'd watch old cartoons on the fuzzy television set. I tried to keep things normal for her, to shield her with a flimsy blanket of games and smiles. But my own days were measured in unanswered phone calls. Every few hours, I would dial Mark's number, and every time, it would go straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Mark Vance. Please leave a message." His voice, so calm and professional, was like a ghost haunting me. "Mark, it's me." I'd whisper into the phone, huddled in the small, damp bathroom so Lily wouldn't hear the desperation in my voice. "Please call me. Please just let me know you're okay. I'm so worried. Lily misses you. I miss you. Please, just call." I left dozens of messages like that. I sent texts that were never delivered. The silence on the other end of the line was a vast, terrifying void. My confident, capable husband, the man who could solve any problem, had simply vanished. The cash in the envelope dwindled with terrifying speed. $80 a night for the room, $20 for a greasy pizza, $5 for a bottle of milk. I started counting every penny, my stomach twisting with a fear I had never known in my life. The fear of not being able to provide. The fear of not having a roof over my daughter's head. 1 week bled into the next. The little while Mark had talked about stretched into an eternity. The brave face I wore for Lily began to crumble at the edges. One night, after she had fallen asleep, clutching Barnaby, I sat on the floor by the window, watching the endless stream of headlights on the highway. Each pair of lights was a family, a person, going somewhere, to a home, to a life, and we were here, stuck, trapped in a nightmare. The last of my resolve broke. The tears I had been holding back for 2 weeks finally came. Hot and silent, I cried for my home, for my life, for the husband I thought I knew. But most of all, I cried for my little girl, sleeping peacefully in a strange bed, completely unaware that our world had not just collapsed, but had been deliberately and methodically destroyed. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait in this room until the money ran out and we were thrown onto the street. I was out of options. There was only one person left to call. The one person who had never fully trusted Mark's perfect facade. My hands trembled as I found her number in my contacts. It was late, but I knew she'd answer. She always did. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice sharp and alert. "Even at this hour. Ellie, what's wrong? It's almost 1 in the morning." I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her everything, but all that came out was a strangled sob, the sound of my own brokenness. "Sarah," I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "I need help." Sarah was there in less than an hour. She didn't ask for the address. She simply said, "Stay put. I'll find you." I knew she would. She probably used some lawyer trick to track my phone's location. When she knocked on the flimsy motel room door, it was a sharp, confident rap that was the complete opposite of the fear and uncertainty living inside those four walls. I opened the door, and for a moment, we just stood there. She took in the scene with a quick, sweeping glance at me tear-stained face. The grim room. Lily asleep on the bed. Her expression, usually so composed, flickered with a mixture of shock and fury. Jesus! Ellie! She breathed, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. She pulled me into a hug. And it wasn't a soft, comforting embrace. It was a hard, grounding one, as if she was trying to physically hold me together. I buried my face in her shoulder and let out a shuddering breath. I felt like I'd been holding for 2 weeks. What the hell happened? She asked, her voice low and steady. We sat at the small, wobbly table under the room's single dim lamp, while Lily slept on, oblivious. I told her everything. The story poured out of me in a messy, disjointed torrent. Mark's late nights, the secret phone calls, the sudden announcement of bankruptcy, the frantic packing, the envelope of cash, the terrifying silence. I told her how he had promised to fix it, how he had said he was protecting us. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face a mask of intense concentration. She didn't offer platitudes or tell me it would be okay. She just listened, her lawyer's mind absorbing every detail, filing it away. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse, she was silent for a long time, staring at the chipped Formica tabletop. Airtight paperwork, she said, almost to herself. What? I asked, confused. She looked up at me, and her eyes were hard. You said you overheard him on the phone at the party. He said he wanted airtight paperwork, and that she can't know. I assumed he was talking about a client. I said weakly. Did you? She asked, her gaze unwavering. Or did you just hope he was? Her question hit a raw nerve. Had I really believed it? Or had I chosen to believe it because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate? Sarah. He lost everything. I insisted, a note of pleading in my voice. I needed her to believe it, too. He was devastated. He was crying. You should have seen him. I'm sure he was very convincing, she said, her tone laced with a cynicism that chilled me. Mark's always been a great performer. Ellie, none of this makes sense. A successful advisor like Mark doesn't just get wiped out overnight without any warning signs. The market didn't just turn. That's not how it works. Not on the scale. And this whole disappearing act to protect you? It sounds like something out of a bad movie. She stood up and began to pace the small room, her mind clearly working at high speed. He gives you cash, tells you not to use your cards, cuts off all contact. He's not hiding from creditors. Ellie, he's hiding from you. No, I whispered, shaking my head. It couldn't be true. No, you're wrong. He loves me. He loves Lily. I hope I'm wrong, she said, stopping in front of me. But my gut is screaming that something is very, very rotten here. I'm going to make some calls in the morning. I have a friend who specializes in forensic accounting, and I'm going to run a property search on your house. But the bank took it, I said. Did they? Sarah replied, one eyebrow raised. Or did Mark just tell you they did? The seed of doubt she planted began to sprout, its thorny vines wrapping around the crumbling foundation of my trust. For the next 2 days, I existed in a state of suspended animation. Sarah had moved us out of the motel and into a small, corporate apartment she kept for when she worked late in the city. It was clean and sterile, but it was safe. She stocked the fridge, bought Lily a new set of coloring books, and went to war for me. I tried to keep myself busy, to not think about the implications of what Sarah was doing. We went to the library, to the park, to the Free City Zoo. But with every passing hour, the dread grew. I felt like I was standing on a cliff edge in a thick fog, waiting for the mist to clear and reveal either solid ground or a fatal drop. The call came on the 3rd day. I was making peanut butter sandwiches for lunch when my phone rang. It was Sarah. Ellie, she said, and her voice was different. It was tight, controlled. It was the voice she used when she had devastating news to deliver to a client. Can you talk? Yes, I said, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. Lily's watching a cartoon. Okay, I have some information. Are you sitting down? I sank onto a kitchen stool, my legs suddenly weak. Just tell me. Sarah. First, she began. There is no bankruptcy filing. Not for Mark. Not for his company. I checked every public record. He's clean. What? But, he said. He lied. Sarah cut in, her voice sharp. Second, the house. It was never seized by any bank. Mark sold it. The sale closed 2 weeks ago, the day before he threw you out. The sandwich knife slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. Sold it. Our home? Without telling me. My signature would have been required. Then I remembered a few weeks back. Mark coming to me with a stack of papers. Just some routine refinancing documents for the portfolio. He'd said casually, "Sign here and here." And I had. Like a fool. Who did he sell it to? I whispered. There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was sold to a shell corporation. A limited liability company registered in Delaware just last month. It's completely anonymous. My mind was reeling, unable to grasp the scale of the deception. So? The money? From the sale? That's where the forensic accountant came in. Sarah continued, her voice grim. He traced it. The money from the house sale, along with the contents of your joint savings, your investment accounts, basically every liquid asset you had, was funneled through that LLC. It was then used to purchase a number of new assets, including a condo, a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Lincoln Park. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was being squeezed from my lungs. A penthouse. While his wife and child were hiding in a roach-infested motel, he was buying a penthouse. But the final piece of the puzzle is the LLC itself, Sarah said, and I could hear the barely suppressed rage in her voice. The name of the company is C.S. Sterling Holdings. C.S. Sterling? I repeated numbly. The name meant nothing to me. I did a little more digging. Ellie. A little social media stalking. Mark has a colleague. A young, ambitious woman on his team. She's posted quite a few pictures of them together at work events over the last year. Her name is Chloe Sterling. The fog cleared. The ground beneath my feet gave way. And I was falling. Chloe Sterling. I remembered her now. A pretty, sharp-faced brunette I'd met once or twice at his company's holiday parties. Mark had introduced her as his protege. The way she had looked at him, it wasn't with professional admiration. It was with hungry possession. And the way he had looked at her, I had told myself it was just a mentor's pride. The whispered phone call at the party. She can't know. He hadn't been talking about a client's wife. He had been talking about me. The secret trips. The late nights. It all clicked into place. Each piece a shard of glass piercing my heart. The world went silent. All I could hear was a rushing of blood in my ears. He hadn't just left me. He hadn't just had an affair. This was a coup. A meticulously planned, ruthlessly executed campaign to erase me from his life. To steal everything we had ever built together and hand it to someone else. He hadn't failed. He had won. Ellie. Are you still there? Sarah's voice was a distant echo. I tried to speak. But no words came out. There's one more thing. She said gently. I'm so sorry. I think you need to see this for yourself. I'm sending you an address. It's a restaurant a few blocks from where you are. Can you get there? Why? I managed to choke out. Because he's there, she said. Right now. Having lunch. A primal, burning rage I had never felt before surged through me, eclipsing the pain. It was a fire that burned away the tears and the shock, leaving behind a hard, cold core of fury. Yes, I said, my voice suddenly clear and steady. I can get there. I left Lily with a kind neighbor in the building, telling her I had an urgent errand. I walked the 3 blocks to the restaurant Sarah had named. It was a chic, expensive-looking place with a glass front and outdoor seating under a green awning. And there they were, sitting at a sun-drenched table, laughing. Mark and Chloe Sterling. He looked happy, relaxed. There was no sign of the broken, devastated man who had sobbed in my arms. He was wearing a new, expensive-looking shirt. He raised a glass of champagne, his eyes sparkling as he smiled at the woman across from him. And Chloe, she looked radiant, triumphant. She reached across the table and placed her hand on his, her fingers tracing the back of his. She was wearing a diamond bracelet I had never seen before. I stood across the street, hidden by the flow of pedestrians, and watched them. I watched my husband, the father of my child, toast to his new life, a life built on the ashes of mine. The perfect picture of our happy family had been a lie. This was the truth. This was his masterpiece. A masterpiece of betrayal. The love I thought we had. The trust I had given him so freely, it meant nothing. I was nothing. Just an obstacle that had been successfully and brutally removed. The world didn't just collapse. It shattered into a million pieces. And I was left standing alone in the wreckage. For a long moment, I was paralyzed. My feet felt leaden, rooted to the grimy sidewalk. The sounds of the city blare of a taxi horn, the chatter of passersby, the distant wail of a siren faded into a dull, meaningless hum. The only thing that was real was a scene playing out across the street. A perfect, sunlit tableau of my destruction. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run across the street, to shatter their champagne glasses, to claw that triumphant smirk off her face. I wanted the world to see him for what he was. A liar. A thief. A monster hiding behind an expensive suit and a charming smile. But what would that accomplish? I'd be dragged away. A hysterical, crazy woman. While they would watch with detached pity, I would become exactly what he would later claim I was: unstable. No. My rage was a fire. But I couldn't let it consume me. I had to let it forge me into something harder. Something sharper. I turned away from the scene, my movements stiff and robotic. I walked back to the apartment, each step a conscious effort. I didn't cry. The capacity for tears seemed to have been burned out of me, replaced by something cold and heavy. When I walked back into the apartment, the kind neighbor brought Lily back. My daughter ran to me, her face bright and smiling. "Mommy, we colored a unicorn," she said, holding up a piece of paper covered in purple and pink crayon scribbles. I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, burying my face in her soft, clean-smelling hair. I held her so tightly she squirmed a little. She was the only thing that mattered. She was the only thing he hadn't been able to steal. Not yet. The thought sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. He wouldn't stop at the money. A man who could do this would do anything to protect his new life. And Lily and I were a loose end. We were a threat. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with Sarah in her small, quiet living room, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of indifferent stars. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice flat. I felt hollowed out, an empty shell. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, had already moved past the shock and was in full strategic mode. She had a legal pad in front of her, already covered in neat, angry-looking handwriting. "We fight," she said simply, her eyes glinting with a familiar, predatory fire I had often seen her use in a courtroom. "We don't just fight, Ellie. We annihilate him." "How?" I asked hopelessly. "He has all the money. He has a team of lawyers. Probably. I have a suitcase and a few $100s left from the cash he gave me." "You have me," she said, her voice fierce. "And you have the truth. It's buried under a mountain of paperwork and lies. But it's there. We just have to dig it out." And so, our war began. It wasn't a war of dramatic confrontations and shouted accusations. It was a quiet, grinding war fought in spreadsheets and legal documents, in late-night strategy sessions and endless cups of bitter coffee. Sarah filed for an emergency court order to freeze the assets of CS Sterling Holdings, citing fraudulent conveyance. Mark's high-priced legal team immediately filed a counter-motion, claiming it was a baseless and vindictive action by a disgruntled ex-wife. The first battle was a loss. The judge, looking at the mountain of airtight paperwork Mark had created, ruled in his favor. On paper, it was all legal. The sale of the house, the transfer of funds, my signature was on everything. I had willingly signed away my life. "It's a temporary setback," Sarah insisted, though I could see the frustration in her eyes. "We just need better evidence. We need to find the smoking gun." But finding that evidence seemed impossible. We were fighting a ghost. Mark had covered his tracks perfectly. Meanwhile, my own life had been reduced to the bare essentials of survival. The corporate apartment Sarah had was only a temporary solution. I couldn't depend on her charity forever. I had to stand on my own 2 feet. Not just for my pride, but for Lily. I needed a job. I needed a home. The reality of my situation was a daily slap in the face. With my bank accounts empty and my credit cards canceled, I was a non-person in a world run on credit scores and financial histories. My resume, with its 10-year gap labeled homemaker, was met with polite rejections. I was a relic from another era, a woman who had bet everything on a man and lost. Desperation led me to a part of the city I'd never had a reason to visit before, a neighborhood of old brick buildings and quiet, forgotten streets. I was looking for any help wanted sign, willing to do anything: wash dishes, wait tables, clean offices. That's how I found Henderson's Books. It was a small, dusty shop tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The windows were crammed with towers of old books, and a faded, hand-painted sign hung above the door. A small, neatly written card was taped to the glass: "Part-time help needed." Inquire within. I pushed open the door, a small bell chiming my arrival. The air inside smelled of old paper, leather, and dust, a scent I found instantly comforting. The shop was a labyrinth of towering shelves, books stacked on the floor, on chairs, on every available surface. Behind a massive wooden counter, a man with a kind, wrinkled face and a shock of white hair looked up from a thick, leather-bound book. He peered at me over a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a gentle rumble. I saw the sign in the window," I said, my voice feeling small and uncertain. "About the job." He studied me for a long moment, his gaze perceptive but not unkind. He saw my worn-out shoes, my too-thin coat, the faint, dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. He saw a woman on the edge. "Do you know anything about books?" he asked. "I love them," I answered honestly. "I used to read all the time." "All right," he said after another pause. "The job is simple. Sorting, shelving, dusting. Cash at the end of each day. $10 an hour. Can you start now?" Tears of gratitude pricked my eyes. It wasn't a career. It wasn't going to get my old life back. But it was a start. It was a lifeline. "Yes," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Yes, I can." My employer was Mr. Henderson. He was a man of few words, but his quiet presence was a balm to my raw nerves. Working at the bookstore became my sanctuary. The methodical, physical work of sorting and shelving books was meditative. It quieted the angry, frightened voices in my head. The world of stories, of tragedies and triumphs contained within those paper pages, reminded me that my own story wasn't over. It was just a very difficult chapter. With my small, daily income, I was able to rent a tiny, one-bedroom apartment in a rundown but safe building a few blocks from the bookstore. It was nothing like my old house. The paint was peeling, the radiators hissed and clanked, and the kitchen was barely big enough for one person. But it was ours. It was a home I had made for us, with my own two hands. I bought second-hand furniture, a lumpy sofa, a wobbly kitchen table, a small bed for Lily. I painted her room a cheerful yellow. We didn't have much, but in that little apartment, surrounded by the smell of old books and fresh paint, I began to feel the first fragile shoots of something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. But Mark wouldn't let me have even that small piece. One evening, there was a knock on the door. It was a process server. He handed me a thick envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. They were divorce papers. Mark was suing me for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. But that wasn't the worst of it. Tucked inside was another motion. He was petitioning the court for sole custody of our daughter. I read the words, my blood turning to ice. He claimed I was mentally and emotionally unstable, that my erratic behavior since our separation proved I was an unfit mother. He cited my sudden move, my lack of stable employment, and my transient lifestyle. He had twisted the situation he had created into a weapon to use against me. He wasn't just trying to take my money. He was trying to take my child. The fury I had felt outside that restaurant came roaring back, hotter and more powerful than before. He had underestimated me. He had assumed that the quiet, dependent wife he had discarded would simply crumble and disappear. He didn't know the person I was becoming. He didn't know the ferocity of a mother fighting for her child. I called Sarah immediately, my voice shaking with rage. "He's trying to take Lily." "I know," she said grimly. "I just got the email from his lawyer. This is how he fights. Ellie, he doesn't fight fair. He goes for the throat. He's not getting her," I said, my voice a low growl. "I will burn the world down before I let him take her." "I know you will," Sarah said, "and I'll be right beside you, handing you the matches." The battle escalated. Mark and Chloe began a campaign of psychological warfare. Chloe would post pictures on social media of her and Mark on lavish vacations, in their new penthouse, always with captions about new beginnings and true happiness. They were designed to hurt me, to show me how much better his life was without me. One day, a brand new, expensive-looking doll was delivered to our apartment for Lily. There was a gift card, just because Daddy is thinking of his princess. Love, Daddy and Chloe. It was a deliberate, cruel intrusion into the small, safe world I was trying to build. It was a message: we can reach you whenever we want. We are still in control. I threw the doll in the trash. When Lily asked where it went, I told her it had a broken part and we'd get a new one. A better one. One that wasn't tainted by their poison. Mr. Henderson saw the toll the fight was taking on me. I was getting thinner, the circles under my eyes darker. I would sometimes stare into space for long moments, my hands frozen on a stack of books. One afternoon, he found me in a quiet aisle, staring blankly at a page I hadn't turned in 10 minutes. A quiet mind is a powerful tool. Eleanor, he said softly, startling me. Yours is very loud right now. I looked up at him, my eyes welling up. I'm sorry. I'm just going through some things. I know, he said with a small, sad smile. The books are patient. They will wait. You should take care of yourself. A story is no good if the hero gives up in the middle. His kindness was almost my undoing. He wasn't just my boss. He was becoming a friend. A quiet, steady anchor in my storm-tossed life. He never pried, but he always seemed to know when I needed a quiet word of encouragement or just to be left alone. The bookstore was more than a job. It was my refuge, and I would need every ounce of strength I could gather there for the battle that was coming. The battle for my daughter. The preliminary custody hearing was set for a cold, gray Tuesday in November. The day felt like a harbinger of doom. I woke up that morning with a knot of dread so tight in my stomach I couldn't eat. Lily, sensing my tension, was quiet and clingy. Her small face creased with worry. Are you going to see Daddy today? She asked as I braided her hair. Yes, sweetie. Mommy just has to talk to a judge about some grown-up things, I said, trying to keep my voice light and even. I couldn't tell her that her father was trying to convince a stranger that I was a bad mother, that he wanted to take her away from me. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Sarah had arranged for a friend to watch Lily for the day. Kissing her goodbye at the door felt like a physical tearing. My entire being screamed to stay with her, to hold her and never let go. Every step I took towards the courthouse felt like a step into a nightmare. Mark was already there when we arrived, standing outside the courtroom with his lawyer. He looked immaculate in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, his hair expertly styled. He looked like the man on the cover of a business magazine, the picture of success and stability. Beside him stood Chloe, her expression a careful mask of concerned sympathy. She was playing the part of the supportive new partner. They were a power couple, and I felt like a ghost haunting the edges of their new life. I wore the best clothes. I had a simple black dress I bought from a thrift store and a worn-out coat. I had done my best with my hair and makeup, but I knew I looked tired and worn down. I looked like what I was, a woman who had been through hell. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was part of his plan. The contrast between us was a visual argument in his favor. He met my eyes across the hall, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something in his gaze. It wasn't remorse. It was a cold, hard glint of victory. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying my pain. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy and solemn. It was a small, wood-paneled room that felt claustrophobic. We sat at opposite tables, Sarah beside me, his slick, expensive lawyer beside him. The judge was an older woman with a stern face and weary eyes that suggested she had seen every kind of human misery. Mark's lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, began. He painted a picture of me that I didn't recognize, but it was crafted from twisted half-truths that made it sound plausible. He spoke of my history of emotional instability, which was a gross mischaracterization of a mild postpartum depression I had suffered for a few months after Lily was born, something Mark had been incredibly supportive of at the time. Now, he was using my most vulnerable moment as a weapon. Davies presented my current circumstances as proof of my unfitness. Your Honor, Ms. Vance has no stable income, working a minimum wage, cash-based job in a bookstore. She lives in a state of transience, in a substandard apartment in a high-crime neighborhood. She has removed the child from her stable home, her school, and her friends. Every word was a lie wrapped in a sliver of truth. He made it sound like I had chosen this life, that I had capriciously ripped Lily away from her world, not that I had been thrown out with nothing. Then, he produced a set of photographs. My heart stopped. They were pictures of me. One was of me coming out of our apartment building, my face pale and tear-streaked from the night I found out he was trying to take Lily. Another was of me in the park, sitting on a bench, staring into space, looking lost and exhausted. They had been following me, spying on me. They had captured my moments of grief and despair, and were now presenting them as my entire identity. As you can see, Your Honor, Davies said with false solemnity, Ms. Vance is clearly not coping. She is overwhelmed and unable to provide the stable, secure environment that a 7-year-old child needs and deserves. Mr. Vance, on the other hand, he then presented Mark's life. Photos of the beautiful Lincoln Park penthouse. Financial statements proving his immense wealth and stability. He spoke of Mark's deep and abiding love for his daughter, his desire to give her the best of everything. He even called Chloe to the stand as a character witness. Chloe was a masterful actress. She spoke in a soft, gentle voice about how much Mark loved Lily, how he talked about her constantly. She described how they were preparing a beautiful new room for Lily in their home, filled with books and toys. She looked at me with an expression of deep pity, as if I were a poor, broken creature to be cared for, not a rival to be defeated. All Mark wants is what's best for his little girl, she said, her voice catching with emotion. He's so worried about them. We both are. I felt a wave of nausea. I wanted to stand up and scream, to call her a liar and a homewrecker. But I just sat there, my hands clenched into fists under the table, while Sarah's hand rested on my arm. A silent command to stay calm. Any outburst would only prove their point. When it was Sarah's turn, she did her best. She argued that my current situation was a direct result of Mark's fraudulent and deceptive actions. She tried to introduce the evidence of the financial transfers, the Shell Corporation. But Mr. Davies was ready. Objection. Your Honor, the Vance's financial disagreements are a separate civil matter. They have no bearing on Ms. Vance's current fitness as a parent. Sustained, the judge said, her voice flat. Stick to the issue at hand. Ms. Jenkins, the child's welfare. We were trapped. Mark had successfully separated his financial crimes from the custody issue. In this room, in this context, he was the stable parent. I was the unstable one. He had all the power, all the resources. He had built a fortress of lies, and we were throwing pebbles at its walls. The final blow came when the judge addressed me directly. Ms. Vance, she said, her eyes fixed on me. I have a report here from a court-appointed social worker who visited your apartment last week. I vaguely remembered the visit. A brusque, overworked woman who had spent 15 minutes looking around and asking clipped questions. The report describes the apartment as cramped and sparsely furnished. It notes that the building's hallway has a pervasive smell of marijuana, and that there is audible fighting from a neighboring apartment. Is this an accurate description of your living situation? The hallway sometimes smells, but my apartment is clean, I said, my voice shaking. I've made it a good home for my daughter. She's happy there. Happiness is important. Ms. Vance, the judge said, her voice devoid of warmth. But so is security. So is stability. Your husband is offering your daughter a life of immense privilege and security. He has a stable home, a successful career. You have a temporary job and an apartment in a questionable neighborhood. In light of your admitted emotional distress, I have serious concerns about your ability to provide for this child's needs right now. My blood ran cold. Admitted emotional distress. She was using the photos against me. She was using my pain, my grief, as a reason to take my child. The judge delivered her ruling. It was a temporary order, she explained, pending a more thorough investigation and a final hearing. But the words that came next destroyed what was left of my world. Pending that final hearing, I am awarding temporary sole physical custody of the child, Lily Vance, to her father, Mr. Mark Vance. Ms. Vance will be granted supervised visitation once a week. This order is effective immediately. The courtroom tilted. The judge's voice faded. The only thing I could hear was a roaring sound in my ears. Sole custody. Supervised visitation. Effective immediately. He was taking her. Today. I looked over at Mark. He wasn't smiling. His face was a mask of grave concern. The perfect image of a reluctant, caring father forced to take drastic measures. But I saw his lawyer, Mr. Davies, give him a small, almost imperceptible nod. They had one. Sarah was arguing, her voice rising with outrage. Your Honor, this is a travesty. You are punishing a victim of fraud and rewarding the perpetrator. That's enough. Ms. Jenkins, the judge snapped. My ruling is final. The transfer of custody will be arranged for 5 o'clock this afternoon. I don't remember leaving the courtroom. I think Sarah had to guide me out. The hallway felt a mile long. The air was thick. Impossible to breathe. I was going to lose my baby. The one thing, the only thing, that had kept me going. He was taking her from me. This was the bottom. I had thought losing my home was the bottom. I had thought discovering the betrayal was the bottom. I was wrong. This was the abyss. A place of absolute darkness. Of complete and utter loss. He hadn't just taken my past and my present. Now, he had taken my future. He had taken my reason for living. As I stood outside the courthouse, the cold wind whipping at my face, I felt a despair so profound I thought it would physically kill me. I had nothing left to lose. And in a strange, terrifying way, a woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous woman in the world. The silence in the apartment that evening was a physical presence. It was heavier than air, pressing in on me from all sides. Lily's half-finished coloring of a unicorn was still on the coffee table. Her small sweater was draped over the back of the lumpy sofa. Her scent, a mixture of baby shampoo and crayons, lingered in her empty room. Every trace of her was a fresh stab of pain. At 5 o'clock exactly, a court officer had come to the door, a woman with a kind but firm face. Mark had waited in a sleek black car down the street, unwilling to face me. Lily hadn't understood. She had cried, her small hands clinging to my legs. I don't want to go. Mommy, I want to stay with you. I had knelt down, my own heart shattering into a million pieces, and forced a smile that felt like a scream. It's okay, sweetie. You're going to have a little sleepover at Daddy's beautiful new house. It's an adventure. I'll see you in a few days. I promise. I had to pry her fingers from my shirt. The officer had gently taken her hand and led her away. I watched from the window as they walked to the black car. The back door opened, and Mark pulled her inside. She pressed her face to the glass, her small hand flat against it, her mouth forming the word mommy. Then the car pulled away and disappeared around the corner, and my world ended. I don't know how long I stood there. The sun set, and the room grew dark. But I didn't turn on the lights. Sarah had tried to stay with me, but I had asked her to leave. I needed to be alone in my grief. It was a shroud I had to wrap myself in. The despair was a bottomless ocean, and I was sinking, letting the crushing blackness take me. All the fight had gone out of me. He had won. He had taken everything. What was the point of fighting anymore? I thought about the pills in my medicine cabinet. I thought about how easy it would be to just stop, to make the pain go away, to drift off into a sleep from which I would never have to wake up. And then, through the fog of my despair, I saw her face against the car window. I heard her small voice crying for me. I'll see you in a few days. I promise. I promise. I had made my daughter a promise. Giving up wasn't an option. Dying wasn't an option. Letting him win was not an option. The despair didn't vanish, but something else rose up through it. Something hard and cold and unbreakable. It was rage. Yes. But it was more than that. It was a diamond-hard resolve, forged in the absolute depths of loss. He thought he had broken me. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The hero of the story, as Mr. Henderson had said, doesn't give up in the middle. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. My voice was different. The tremor was gone. It was calm, steady, and dangerously quiet. I'm ready to work, I said, without preamble. Ellie, are you okay? She asked, her voice laced with concern. I'm not okay, I said, but I'm done crying. He's made this personal. Now, we do the same. We need to stop playing defense. We need to attack. For the first time in a long time, Sarah was the one who sounded hesitant. Ellie, his legal position is strong. We need real, hard evidence. Then we'll get it. I interrupted. You're a lawyer. You fight in the courtroom. But the evidence isn't in the courtroom. It's out here. He built a fortress of lies. I'm going to find the cracks. The next few days were a blur of focused, obsessive work. My grief was a furnace, and I shoveled my anger and pain into it, turning it into fuel. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I lived on black coffee and a burning need for justice. My first supervised visit with Lily was agony. It took place in a sterile, joyless room at a family services center, with a sour-faced supervisor watching our every move. Lily ran to me, and I held her, trying to soak up every second of the hour we were allowed. She told me about her new room, about the big television and all the toys. She said Chloe was nice but that she missed her little apartment. She missed me. When can I come home? Mommy, she whispered, her eyes wide and pleading. Soon, baby. I'm working on it. I promise. I told her, my heart aching. Mark had dressed her in expensive new clothes. Her hair was in a perfect, intricate braid that I didn't know how to do. He was trying to erase me, to replace me in every aspect of her life. Seeing her, holding her, only strengthened my resolve. I went back to Sarah's office that afternoon with a new idea. My old design portfolio, I said, pacing her office. It's still in a box in the attic of her old house. The house he sold to her company. Ellie, what does a design portfolio have to do with anything? Sarah asked, rubbing her tired eyes. It has my old laptops, my hard drives, everything from my design career. For 10 years, Mark used me as his unpaid graphic designer. Brochures for the company, presentations for clients, charts, graphs, I made them all. He always said I was better than anyone he could hire. A flicker of understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. You think there might be something on those drives? I don't know, I admitted. But it's a place to start. His entire business life is probably archived on those drives, hidden in old project files. And there's something else. There was one employee he always complained about, a junior analyst named David Chen. Mark fired him about a year ago. He said the kid was sloppy. But I always got the feeling there was more to it. Mark seemed almost afraid of him. Sarah was already typing furiously on her keyboard. David Chen. I'll see if I can find him. But how are we going to get into that house? We can't get a warrant without probable cause, I said, the legal terms I picked up from her sounding strange in my mouth. But Chloe is arrogant. She and Mark are on a celebratory trip to Aspen right now. She posted it on Instagram this morning. I held up my phone to show Sarah the picture, the two of them, grinning, clinking champagne glasses on a ski lift. The house is empty. Ellie, you are not suggesting what I think you're suggesting, Sarah said, her voice sharp with alarm. Breaking and entering is a crime, a felony. If you get caught, you will never see Lily again. Ever. I won't get caught, I said, my voice flinty. I designed the security system for that house. I know the blind spots. I know the master codes. I know every inch of that place. It's my home. It was a crazy, reckless plan, born of desperation. Sarah argued against it vehemently, listing all the ways it could go catastrophically wrong. But she saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a grieving victim anymore. It was the look of a soldier going over the top. That night, dressed in black, I slid through the manicured hedges of my old neighborhood. Maple Creek looked the same, a perfect suburban dreamscape bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. But it was a dream I had woken up from. I saw the lies behind the perfect lawns and the cheerful, lit windows. The house was dark and silent, a hulking ghost of my former life. My heart pounded as I slipped into the backyard, my feet silent on the soft grass. I moved to the small keypad for the secondary alarm on the basement door, the one I knew they would never think to change the code for. My fingers trembled slightly as I punched in Lily's birthday. The light turned from red to green. A soft click echoed in the night. I was in. The house smelled wrong. It smelled of Chloe's cloyingly sweet perfume and some kind of chemical air freshener. They had tried to erase my scent. Our scent. I moved quickly and quietly, a wraith in my own home. Up the stairs to the attic. The air was still and warm. I found the box labeled the beginning almost immediately. My portfolio. My hard drives. I grabbed the whole box. On my way out, a thought struck me. I crept into what had been our master bedroom. Her things were everywhere, expensive clothes thrown over a chair, a dozen bottles of perfume on my vanity. On the nightstand, next to Mark's side of the bed, was a small, leather-bound journal. Chloe's diary. It was a long shot. But narcissists often need to document their own brilliance. I hesitated for only a second before grabbing it and stuffing it into my bag. I was out of the house in less than 10 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs, melting back into the shadows of the quiet street. Back at the apartment, I didn't stop to feel the adrenaline or the fear. I plugged in the first old hard drive. 4 hours. I sifted through a decade of my life, a digital archaeology of our marriage. There were thousands of files, family photos, vacation videos, Lily's school projects, and work files. Dozens and dozens of folders for Vance Financial. It was almost 4 a.m. when I found it. It was buried deep in a folder for a presentation I had made for Mark 3 years ago. The presentation itself was boring market analytics and investment strategies. But attached to the file was a separate, password-protected spreadsheet I didn't remember making. It was labeled contingency. My fingers flew across the keyboard, trying passwords. Our anniversary? Lily's birthday. His mother's maiden name. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when I thought about Mark's ego. His supreme self-confidence. I typed in the name of his first boat. The one he had named before he even met me, Mastermind. The spreadsheet opened. And I saw everything. It wasn't just a plan to leave me. It was a detailed, multi-year strategy. He called it his emancipation protocol. It laid out a step-by-step guide to systematically siphon money from our joint accounts into offshore holdings. It detailed the creation of the shell corporation. It even had a timeline, with key dates circled. The date he would sell the house. The date he would declare bankruptcy. The date he would file for custody. It was all there. In black and white. Cold. Calculating. And sociopathic. He had been planning to destroy me for years. Then I saw the other names. It wasn't just him and Chloe. There was a list of clients whose high-risk investments had funded the initial seed money for the scheme. These weren't just bad investments that had failed. As he had claimed, he had deliberately defrauded them, funneling their money into his own pockets, planning to use the market collapse as his cover story. And at the bottom of the list, I saw a familiar name. David Chen. Next to his name was a note, severance paid. ND signed. Potential liability. He hadn't just fired the kid. He had bought his silence. I finally had it. The smoking gun. The keys to his entire corrupt kingdom. I picked up my phone to call Sarah. But then my eyes fell on the leather journal I had stolen. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Chloe's handwriting was a sharp, aggressive slant. The pages were filled with her ambition. Her contempt for me, the suburban mouse. And her adoration for Mark. But then I found the entry from the day after the custody hearing. Victory. The judge gave Mark the kid. He was brilliant. The photos of the little mother looking pathetic were his idea. So smart. Now the last loose end is tied up. With the child in our control, the mouse will have no leverage. She'll have to accept the pittance settlement Mark offers her and just disappear. And if she doesn't, Mark has a plan for that, too. He says there are ways to make someone look like a truly unfit mother. An accident. A little mistake. Something that would make sure she never sees her kid again. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money and custody anymore. This was a threat. A direct, chilling threat against me. He wasn't just trying to win in court. He was willing to destroy me completely to protect his perfect new life. I stood up. The journal clutched in my hand. The spreadsheet glowing on the laptop screen. The fear was gone. Replaced by an icy clarity. This ended now. Not in a courtroom months from now. It ended now. I didn't call Sarah. Not yet. A formal legal battle would take months. Maybe years. Mark would use every delay tactic. Every dirty trick his expensive lawyers could dream up. He would bury us in motions and appeals. Chloe's journal entry proved that he was dangerous. He saw me not just as an inconvenience, but as a threat to be neutralized. He had Lily. I couldn't risk him getting more desperate, more vicious. I had to end this on my own terms. And I had to do it now. I spent the next 2 days in a fever of activity. My design skills, the ones I had packed away and forgotten for a decade, came roaring back to life. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was a designer with a client and a deadline. My client was justice, and my deadline was my daughter's freedom. Using the information from Mark's emancipation protocol spreadsheet, I didn't just create a chart. I created a story, a visual narrative of his betrayal. I designed a clear, simple, and devastatingly effective infographic that showed the flow of money from our joint accounts, from his defrauded clients throughout the Shell Corporation and into his new life with Chloe. I used color coding, timelines, and excerpts from the spreadsheet itself. It was clean, professional, and impossible to misunderstand. It was the kind of presentation Mark himself would have used to impress a wealthy client. Only this one told the story of his crimes. Then, I scanned the most damning pages from Chloe's journal. The entry about me. The suburban mouse. The entry that detailed their plan to frame me as an unfit mother. The part about the accident. I integrated these scans into my presentation. It was no longer just about financial fraud. It was about conspiracy, malice, and a direct threat to my safety. While I worked, Sarah finally tracked down David Chen. He was working a dead-end data entry job, a shadow of the ambitious young analyst he had been. He was terrified, bound by the non-disclosure agreement Mark had forced him to sign. But when Sarah carefully explained that Mark had not only stolen from clients, but was now threatening the life of his ex-wife, something in him broke. The fear was replaced by a quiet, simmering anger. He agreed to talk. He had his own evidence, emails Mark had sent him, instructing him to falsify reports and disguise the fund transfers. He was the human element, the corroborating witness who could bring my digital evidence to life. The final piece was the delivery. I couldn't just hand this to the police or a judge. Mark would spin it, deny it, bury it. I had to detonate it in the one place he couldn't control the narrative, the court of public opinion. He had built his entire empire on his reputation, his image as a brilliant, trustworthy financial guru. I was about to burn that image to the ground. Mark and Chloe were due back from Aspen on Friday. The final custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. He thought he had the weekend to relax, to prepare for his final victory. He was wrong. On Friday morning, I sent an email. My hands were perfectly steady. The subject line was simple: Vance Financial, the Emancipation Protocol. The recipients were a carefully curated list. First, the other clients on the fraud list from Mark's spreadsheet: powerful, wealthy people he had stolen from. Second, the entire board of directors of the investment bank Mark's firm was partnered with. Third, a handful of the most voracious financial journalists in Chicago. And finally, I sent a copy to Mark's lawyer, Mr. Davies, and a blind copy to Sarah. Attached to the email was my presentation, my masterpiece, the story of his betrayal, told in his own words and numbers. I also attached a signed affidavit from David Chen, along with copies of Mark's incriminating emails. Then, I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. My phone started ringing within the hour. It was Sarah. "Ellie, what did you do?" She half yelled, but I could hear the grudging admiration in her voice. "My inbox is exploding. Davies is calling me nonstop. He's panicking." "Is it working?" I asked calmly. "Working? Ellie, you didn't just drop a bomb. You dropped a nuclear weapon. The bank's chairman called me personally. They've launched an internal investigation. The SEC is probably already on its way. You didn't just expose him. You've ruined him." The rest of the day was a cascade of consequences. News of the scandal broke online, spreading like wildfire. The story was too juicy to resist: the high-flying financial advisor, the secret affair, the elaborate fraud, the diabolical plot against his wife. Mark's carefully constructed world was imploding in real time, for everyone to see. The final checkmate move came late that afternoon. I received a call from an unknown number. It was Mr. Davies, Mark's lawyer. His voice, once so slick and condescending, was now strained and desperate. "Ms. Vance," he said, his tone dripping with false cordiality. "My client would like to discuss a settlement. He is prepared to be extremely generous." "There is nothing to discuss," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "Tell your client his protocol is over. My client is willing to drop the custody suit immediately." Davies said, "The desperation clear now. He will grant you sole physical and legal custody. He will sign over the full value of the Maple Creek house, plus a significant alimony settlement. All charges will be dropped if you agree to sign a comprehensive NDA." He was trying to buy my silence, to contain the damage. He was offering me everything he had stolen, and more, just to make it all go away. A month ago, I might have been tempted, but not now. "Here are my terms," I said, and I could hear Sarah, who was now with me, gasp softly. "I want full, sole, and uncontested custody of my daughter. He will relinquish all parental rights. He will have no contact, no visitation, nothing. He will cease to exist in her life. I want the full value of every asset he stole, returned to me and to the other clients he defrauded. I want a public apology, and I will not be signing a non-disclosure agreement. He doesn't get to hide. The world will know exactly what he did. You have 1 hour to have him sign it. Otherwise, this all goes to the district attorney." Davies was sputtering, but he knew he was beaten. An hour later, a messenger delivered the signed documents. It was over. I had one. A few months later, the sunlight streamed into a new kitchen. It wasn't the vast, marble-clad kitchen in Maple Creek. It was a cozy, bright space in a charming two-bedroom apartment in a quiet, tree-lined city neighborhood. It was smaller, but it was ours, really ours. The air smelled of cinnamon and fresh coffee. Lily sat at the small wooden table, happily drawing. She was laughing, a sound that was pure, uncomplicated joy. The shadows were gone from her eyes. She was safe. She was home. I had opened my own small, one-woman graphic design studio. I had clients. I had work that I loved. That challenged me. That was mine. Mr. Henderson still let me work at the bookstore on Saturdays, mostly because I loved the smell of old paper and his quiet, steady company. Mark Vance was a ghost. He had been disbarred, disgraced, and was facing a mountain of lawsuits and a federal investigation. Chloe had left him the moment the money disappeared, releasing a public statement that she, too, was a victim of his manipulation. The penthouse was sold. His empire was dust. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about him. Not with hatred. Not anymore. But with a kind of detached pity. He had been so obsessed with creating the perfect life that he had destroyed a real one. He had been the master of his own universe. But his universe was built on lies. And it had collapsed into a black hole of his own making. I looked over at Lily. She held up her drawing for me to see. It was a picture of the two of us, holding hands, with a big, smiling sun above our heads. Our apartment was in the background, with flowers in the window box. It wasn't a mansion. There were no fancy cars, but it was filled with color and light. I took the drawing and taped it to the refrigerator. My masterpiece. It wasn't a perfectly curated home or a life that looked good in a magazine. My masterpiece was this moment, this peace. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that after the storm, I had not only survived, I had learned how to build a better, stronger house on my own. I was no longer Eleanor Vance, the wife of a successful man. I was just Eleanor. And for the first time in a very long time, that was more than enough.